Hi, my name is Aaron and this is my show, Re-Education, and today I'm going to talk about removing the red pill. It is something that can actually be done, and I have done it to other people and myself many times in the past, and I'm going to explain to you in this video how exactly you can do that. And it's really not that hard. What you actually have to deal with is a bunch of different forms of argumentation tactics. And I'm going to get to that in a second, but just a quick, brief recap on what the red pill is for any alien species that happen to have discovered our vast tomes of YouTube knowledge and decided to research a little bit about us, because we are clearly not doing anything to save the world at the current moment. So likely this isn't going to be discovered by human beings, but in fact an intelligent race that's seeing our content for the first time, possibly millions of years from now. Now, the red pill, for those of you who don't know, is a fiction, an idea that was created by a bunch of, well, basically neoliberals and neoconservatives to explain the awakening that they were just so readily having about how the system is flawed and fucked up. They were right about that part, but their solution, unfortunately, was horribly, horribly wrong. It turned out that their solution, the red pill solution, is fascism, Nazism, racism somehow, and Trump is involved in some way. Because all of that definitely makes sense and certainly will fix the system and all of the flaws therein. I mean, taking an actual look at the system and finding out how it's broken and then actually, going in and fixing those problems definitely won't work. And replacing the system with something that would function much better certainly is out of the question. What we have to do is we have to blame a scapegoat, we have to find a daddy, and we have to make sure that there's a new rise in Nazis. Yay! Now, I'm not saying that everybody that is red-pilled is a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer or even has Nazi beliefs. That's ridiculous, and if you want a detailed explanation on what I think about Nazism and fascism, please check out my video called Fascism. But now, we're going to, after the caveats, carry on. Now, I feel that it's necessary to have this video because I, unlike Vosh, am not someone that engages in a whole lot of debates. Now, if you want to see me engage in a debate, I can possibly do such a thing, but what I prefer to do is have a conversation with people. I find that even though a debate is necessary from time to time, it does definitely have its benefits, that for the most part, conversations are where I can do the best work. And I feel like more people want to debate others rather than have a conversation with them, and that inherently ends up resulting, not every time, but for the most part, in those people just strengthening their convictions. And I mean that on both sides. When one person is debating another, they are basically getting into a fight. They don't want to show that the other person is going to lose. They want to make sure that they come out on top and they come out as the winner. And that is why strength is so important when having a debate. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're right or wrong. It only matters that you're strong. But when you're having a conversation with somebody, when you're actually talking to somebody one-on-one, it's a lot different. It removes that combative atmosphere and welcomes people into more of an idea of a friendly conversation. So people are more open to actually tell you the way they truly feel about something. And if you're willing to give a little, then they are too. And oftentimes it results in both of you looking at something from a different viewpoint and hopefully moving that other person a little bit closer to your side. Now, how do we even do such a thing? Well, I would suggest the very first thing that you should do is check out my How to Revolution series. It explains in detail several argumentation tactics that I'm not going to cover here that are essential for making somebody come to your side. But today I'm going to talk about a few that I didn't touch on in that video. And the first of which I call the Dillahunty. Now, the Dillahunty was created, or at least popularized, by somebody from a TV show called The Atheist Experience. His name is Matt Dillahunty, and he is basically a skeptic that asks very good questions. His mantra is to always ask people what they believe and why. And this is incredibly important because when you're having a conversation with somebody, you have to realize that it is not your job to be waiting until that person is done talking before you can stand up and start saying all of the things that you wanted to say. The point in having a conversation is to listen to the other person's argument, take it in, and understand what they're saying. It's not about changing somebody else's mind, remember. It's about having them come to the conclusions on their own. And you're never going to be able to get somebody to come to a conclusion if you're trying to force your opinion down their throat. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to read your essays or books. They're just going to become emboldened in their position and try to fight harder because you haven't tackled the root reason on why they believe those things. It is essential that you not only find out what they believe, but why. Why is the most important factor, because if you don't know that, then you're not going to be able to move forward. And it is important, essential even, to continue that line of reasoning throughout the entire conversation. It is not about you giving them answers. It is about them coming to those answers on their own. So asking why is not something you do once, not something you do twice, but something you do throughout the entire conversation. Sometimes it can sound a little bit like a child saying why to everything that you say, but that is essential. It is very important if you're actually interested in helping that person change their mind or come to an alternative conclusion. Now, the next argumentation tactic is something that I like to call asking leading questions. When you're asking leading questions, it helps tie into the what you believe and why, the Dillahunty tactic, because you're able to actually formulate a line of reasoning in that other person without you ever having to pressure them into doing it. Now, for example, I have a friend who said that they don't agree with people punching Nazis, to which I asked them why. They told me what they believed, that they don't believe that people should punch Nazis, and I say, why do you believe that? And they say, because I think that violence is never necessary and that nobody should ever punch anyone. It's a pretty obvious, pretty normal thing to think. So I asked them the leading question. Okay, if you were at the bar and you happen to have a partner that is a person of color and somebody at the bar called them the N-word, would you be justified in hitting them? Not legally, of course, but would you feel morally justified in hitting them? And they said, yeah, sure, if somebody directly calls my partner the N-word, of course, I'm going to knock them out. But that's directly calling them something to their face. That's not just indiscriminately saying some kind of word online. Those two things aren't equivalent. There should be no violent retaliation when it comes to words. And I said, yes, of course. I 100% agree with you. Words are something that should not be retaliated against with violence. But if somebody was to use violence in that situation, I wouldn't personally be upset about it. Now, what if that same person, instead of saying that word to your partner directly, said it about your partner on the other side of the bar and you heard it a few minutes later? Now are you justified in hitting that person? I mean, it didn't happen directly, it happened indirectly. And they said, well, yeah, under that situation, sure. I would definitely see how hitting that person would be morally justified, even if it's not legally justified, certainly would be morally justified. And I said, okay, that's fantastic. I'm glad that we agree. Now say that person at the bar happens to show up there every weekend and say to all of the people there that he wants to take his gun out and shoot anybody who's a person of color, an N-word, because that's what he believes. He believes in a genocide. Should people be morally justified in hitting them then? And that person, conflicted, says, well, yeah, I guess I do agree with that. To which I responded, well, that's exactly how a lot of us feel when we see some idiot like Richard Spencer getting punched. We think that that action is morally justified because he actively calls for a genocide of people of color. Now, do you see why we think that that is the correct form of action, even if violence isn't necessarily the best solution, even if it doesn't necessarily result in all of the best consequences all the time? And sure, it is bad optics, but I would be hard-pressed to say that hitting somebody for calling your girlfriend or boyfriend the N-word isn't justified. Ergo, why it isn't justified to hit Richard Spencer for being a reactionary douchebag. That is what you call a leading question. Another line of argumentation I like to use is called the bullshit sandwich. And I used to use it when I was a bougie capitalist fuckwad that used to work as a manager at some fancy-ass establishment. So what the bullshit sandwich basically is where you use a compliment. Hey, Jim, your hair looks really good today. Then the body of the content that you want to talk about. By the way, all of those reports that you wrote for me yesterday had spelling mistakes, and I'm going to have to get you to go through them again. And then you conclude with another compliment. But it turns out that you've really improved on your personal hygiene. Now, of course, that example has all kinds of red flags when it comes to sexual harassment and power dynamics, but the fundamental idea is the same. You start off with a compliment, and then you fill in the body of the argument that you want to present with a criticism of their beliefs or their work ethic, and you finish that off with another compliment. Bullshit sandwich. It helps to ease criticism when giving it to somebody else. It's a lot like a spoonful of sugar helping the medicine go down. Now, as I've said before, the other argumentation tactic is that you can't ever change someone's mind. You have to have them come to those conclusions on their own because changing someone's mind is impossible. The other argumentation tactic that you have to think about all of the time is that this is not a monster to fight. When you're attacking somebody's belief structure, you can't think of it as a monster or a demon that you have to cut down. You have to think of it as a mountain to climb. And while climbing that mountain, you have to take it one step at a time. You can't just jump in with a tiny little knife and expect to cut down a tree, but you can cut out enough of its roots to kill that tree eventually. It's just not something that you can do all at once. And you have to realize that when you're having a conversation with somebody, rarely are you going to have that eureka moment, that instance where they immediately change all of their beliefs and say, hey, you were right. A lot of the time it's underwhelming, and it comes to a conclusion where both of you hopefully agree on a lot of things and disagree on some things, but you move that person a little bit further to your side. That's something that you have to look at as being the goal and not defeating the monster, because there is no monster to defeat. Politics and positions exist in a four-dimensional space. Even the political compass chart is not an accurate depiction on what people actually believe. And finally, the best possible method of argumentation that I have found to be able to convert people from one identity to another, from one ideology to another, is through strength. And people like Vosh and ContraPoints and other people like that have found a way to do that very effectively. Using strength is one incredibly fantastic method of getting somebody to move positions, because people like strength. They see someone that's strong, and they usually want to follow their example. That's just part of human nature. You believe specific positions because of varying different reasons, and finding those specific reasons why that person believes that specific thing is the goal. It's not necessarily about attacking that thing, it's about attacking the reasons behind it. At least, that's the way I look at it. My name is Aaron, this is my show Reeducation, and thanks for watching.